All right, investpreneurs, welcome back. My name is Chris Sachinelli, and I get to build, buy, and sell simple profit businesses every single day. And today we're going to come back at a super simple growth strategy that we can implement in order to get to our first 100 customers, right? So this is something that is not scalable, but oftentimes when it comes time to getting the first 100 customers, or maybe you want to task somebody on the team with getting 100 more customers or something along those lines, things that move the meter in a measurable way, it's really easy to just execute things that do not scale, right? Just do the hard work, do the boring work. And oftentimes it's this type of stuff that gets us to traction. And it's oftentimes this type of stuff that most bootstrappers or most founders just aren't interested in or willing to just do in order to get to that level of critical mass, right? Today, I want to talk through a cold outreach strategy, meaning this is something that you can control, right? Because we can always control our activity, right? Our actions is something that we can control. We can't control what somebody else does in return, but we can control our activity at all times. So this is an activity-based strategy, which is important. And it's all about getting to your ideal customer persona, building a list in terms of your top 100 or 200 of who your ideal customer persona is, and then having a reason to reach out to them, have a conversation, engage them, and hopefully convert them, right? So let's talk through this quickly. This is an interview-based strategy, and the goal of this strategy ultimately at the end of the day is to build a relationship, to have a conversation with, again, your ideal customer. Make sure that what you are interpreting to be the problem that you're solving really is a problem, making sure there's something there, really understanding your market, right? And then at the end, creating and positioning an offer of value and allowing the freedom for that other person who's your ideal customer to kind of put what it's willing to be worth, right? What the price is, right? What the true value is. And that allows you to cherry pick the market, right? And by cherry pick the market, I mean you're able to collect money from absolutely everybody who's willing to give it to you, right? So when you're talking about economic cherry picking, a great example, maybe an apple costs $10 for an apple, right? And if there's 10 people, maybe 5 people are willing to spend $10 or more, right, for that apple. In that situation, you're going to sell 5 apples for $10. You're going to make $50. However, if you cherry pick the market, right, and you literally go up to each individual person and you ask them, hey, what are you willing to pay for this apple? Then there's a good chance that the 5 that paid you nothing are willing to give you at least $1 or more, right? Some level of incremental revenue greater than zero that you otherwise would have captured. And then if you go to the folks that paid the $10, you already know, well, in this situation you don't, but theoretically, they are already willing to pay 10, so it would be 10 or more, right? So some folks would say 10, some folks will say 12, some folks will say maybe 50, right? And you're literally cherry picking all of the economic value that folks are willing to pay, and because of that, you're extracting more economics from the customer base that you're targeting, right? You're pulling out more money from that market. It's hard to scale cherry pick economics, but it's a really great thing to launch with, and it's a great way to learn pricing, right? So that's also what this is set up for. So in order to execute this strategy, what you're doing is your first thing you're putting together is a list of 100 of your ideal customers, right? So you want to make sure you have a clear understanding of your ideal customer. I mean, for Bootstrapper Capital, it is a bootstrapped business, right? A bootstrap founder, right? Less than 5 folks on the cap table, less than $1 million in revenue, right? Ideally B2B, and then ideally B2B SaaS, right? That's our ideal customer because those are the best economics to our deals that we do when we look to acquire companies, right? So that's our ICP, and we know it's very, very clear. So my next task would be to go to market and find 100 of those. Again, this is the boring work. This is the stuff that folks don't tend to want to do. Where you can go, you should know, right? So everyone's market is different. You should already know where folks are hanging out. go to where people are hanging out. So in our situation, it's something like an indie hacker, or you could search like any number of terms on Google at this point, and like everybody has an Airtable for something. So there's already, I'm sure, a number of lists like we do it. So I'm assuming other people do it as well. I've already curated targets and whatnot that folks are tracking. There's different, product hunt, right? Like any number of these sources, right, where our people hang out is where we would go, and then we would just build a list of 100, right? And that list, it's who the person is, what the site is, what their LinkedIn is, what their Twitter is, what their email is. And I want to have all of those touch points. If I can't get all of the touch points, I'm not adding them to the list. I'm going to go find somebody else. I want a complete list of 100, right? It's a really good sample starting point. If you want to really make sure you're going to hit this with results, you can, level this up, and you can say, instead of 100, make it 300 or make it 1,000, right? But you also want it to be manageable, where it's not like too overwhelming, and one person can just like commit to this as a strategy and then execute it all the way through fruition, right? So that's why less is sometimes more, but you want to have enough of a critical mass where you're actually going to get outcomes and results from this, right? So that's the first thing, is you're building the list. The second thing is you're doing outreach, cold outreach, right? And you're doing cold outreach to that ideal customer persona, and you're reaching out to them for a reason. And in this situation, we genuinely like to lead with, one of two things. One, the first thing that we enjoy the most is a podcast, right? So like if you're bringing a product to market, then you should definitely have a podcast. It's a great strategy. It's a great way to boost SEO and build an audience. But it's also a great way to reach out to folks that are in your market and just have good, frank conversations, right? And really be able to engage for the right reasons. We love leading with the podcast strategy, especially for this, because it's super clean and it's a really good way to exchange fair value, right? I'd like to interview you and get X amount of time on your calendar. In exchange, we're going to do this podcast, edit it, and send it out, right? So it's like there's a good, fair exchange. And then you got to approach it the right way, right? And you can't do this as like a bait and switch, which I want to overly communicate as we work through this strategy, that that's not what you want to do. You want to be super transparent and do it for all of the right reasons from the beginning, right? So you want to communicate where you're at. You want to, lead with your why, right? You want to be super transparent with what's going on. But you run cold outreach, you get the conversation, the interview booked, right? Which is just, sending some emails and messaging folks and, being a good person. And most folks are willing to engage back and help out. And you'll definitely get a level of critical mass if you have a large enough lead list where you will have definitely conversations, right? And that's the most important thing here, is you want to have conversations. Like that's what you're trying to really be able to do, and just be a good human being, be super transparent, forthcoming, right, forthright, and lead those conversations in the right direction. So the first step is to book it, to run outreach, book the interviews, have the conversations, communicate exactly where you're at, what's going on. You want to then turn those interviews into articles, right, where you're literally taking the content, repurposing the content, again, making it both audio, ideally video if you have it, and then now written. And then because you're capturing it in these two places, you're then leading with this invite of, hey, would you be willing to join us with this, right? And that's when you're inviting, a goodwill invite, right? You've already delivered the interview and the content, the article, you've given them the benefit, right? The value that's being created. And now you would invite them and say, hey, you already know that this is what we're working on. This is our why. This is why we care about it. This is why we're passionate about it based off our conversation. It felt like you would find value in it for these reasons, right? So you want to have a good story, and you want to have a good, pitch, right? It's sales to a certain extent, but it's warmer sales because there's some level of a relationship there. You want to be really, really super aware, though, that you don't want to abuse this strategy. And that's why I'm trying to over communicate. I think it's like the third or fourth, maybe the fifth time even, where I'm saying like, be super transparent and just be a good human being about like where you are in your journey when you're having these interviews and having these conversations. Because like, if you're not, then, by the time you get to the invite, it doesn't feel right. It's just not a good look, right? So just be super transparent, let people know what's going on. And then when it comes time to inviting them and delivering some value, you truly are, and you're hoping that that exchange then becomes, would you be willing to participate? If so, what would it be worth to you? And that's it. And you leave it at that. And you let the person name their price, right? And by having them name their price, that is you cherry picking the economics of, this is worth $1 to me. This is worth $5 to me. This is worth $20 to me. And the way in which you're framing that invite, you're pretty much having them in a situation where they're going to say something, right? It's either, no, I don't want to participate in it for these reasons, right? So if you get a no, that's okay, but you want to know the why behind the no, right? You don't want it to, and that's a big reason why you're investing the time to build a relationship up top with the interview and the article, right? Because if there's a real no, you want to know that. You need to know that. It's not just all about charity, right? You don't want this to be charity. You want to be doing this for the right reasons, which is to acknowledge value, capture folks in terms of that value, understand where the value lives, and then learn what the pricing should be, right? And it's going to accomplish two things for you. It's going to help you get some initial customers and traction, and then which allows you to be in business and begin to work on your operating system, right, and your processes. And then the next thing is going to be, you're going to learn pricing, right? If, like, again, you go out and you ask people to buy an apple, and on average most folks are willing to spend, $10 on an apple around there, then like that's going to be the price, right? And then there's also ways where once you have some data, you can actually define what the best possible economic price is to get the most money. Not going to complicate this conversation and go into that, but there's ways to actually figure it out and back into it. Next, once you invite them, you're going to convert them, right? And now they're going to be a customer, which is huge. That's a big part of what you're trying to do here. This is a first 100 customer acquisition strategy, right? Again, this is not scalable. You can't do this indefinitely. It's like really poor unit economics. But when you're first getting going, this is such a phenomenal strategy. And then if you can figure out ways to scale it over time, there are ways to scale it over time, but you're doing it for different reasons. Right now you just want to be super simple. It's, let's get some initial customers. Now you invited somebody, they're paying you. Your next job is to activate them, which is to get them to value fast. You want to actually take them through the experience, make sure that they're getting to the value, have the communication loops, right? So you're looking for feedback loops at this activation stage. And what this is doing is it's then confirming if that price that they said they were willing to pay actually is equal to the value, right? You want the value to be greater than the price. You don't, and you want to know if the value is greater than the price, because then the next level of question is like, what would you have paid? How much more can I charge for this, right? Or if it's not, if the value is not greater than the price, then you want to know, like, what would be a fair price for you to stick with us? Right? And those are just like good, clean conversations to, again, have. And you want to just collect that information. That's information you need to know as you're bootstrapping and as you're building towards your critical mass goals, right? So your level of sustainability. Now, once you did confirm value, and this is a great price, good value, right? Great value at a good price, then you're in a good situation to now go and close the loop. Which, again, this is supposed to be, everything you want to do is always going to have some sort of flywheel, right? Some sort of loop to it. You always want to have self-feeding mechanisms, right? Even if it's a mechanism that doesn't really scale. In this situation, you don't want to, continue to have to go look for more leads, because that takes you time. So let's cut it out and let's simplify our processes and build a better business system. So let's just ask for some referrals. Hey, can you give me 3 people that would also be a good fit for what you just experienced, right? I want to interview them, have this conversation, get the article, invite them in, let them name their price, and then make sure that this thing's valuable for them, right? Just work them through. And that's why it's so important that you deliver on the experience. Now, most folks are either going to say, no, I don't really have anybody, right? And that's either them kind of dismissing you if you haven't built enough of a relationship, or, maybe it's, they don't think that this would be something that they, are proud to refer somebody else to, things like that. So like there's information in the answers, and sometimes you got to read between the lines. And then more often than not, oftentimes folks like to help people, especially if you've been really good as a human being throughout this process. They're like, all right, here's a couple of people. And now they refer you, and now you just saved a ton of time. It's a warm invite now, so the likelihood of you getting that interview is much higher, and this whole thing gets better. And if you can get this to the point where you have enough coming in at the top, where you can get traction going, and then enough of the experience is good enough that folks are continuing to refer you, this is truly a strategy that you can continue to run until you get to your first 100 or whatever that X number is that you're trying to achieve. All right. Hopefully this was super simple. Hopefully this visual made sense. Hopefully you followed along. All right. If not, please let me know in the comments how we could make this better. If so, please share your results, and hopefully you build in public.